It was a tough one to start the game and an even tougher one to end the game as the Chicago Bears fall to the Minnesota Vikings 29-22. The Bears now at 2-3, Minnesota moving to 4-1. And we are here to break it all down on the Sports Cubicle with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari throughout the entire show talking White Sox and Tony La Russa. I'm your host, Mike Mercado. We hope you're each enjoying your Sunday, even though the Bears drop this game in Minnesota. Some quick numbers before we get to some conversation. Justin Fields, 15 for 21, 208 yards and a touchdown. On the rushing side, Justin Fields, 8 carries for 47 yards. David Montgomery coming back from injury, 12 rushes for 20 yards. Khalil Herbert, 4 rushes, 11 yards. And on the receiving game, spread apart a little bit, but most importantly, we saw Darnell Mooney with 2 huge passes, but alas, one of the kids, Smith Marset, gets stripped at the end. The Bears get robbed of an opportunity to see what they can do in the red zone with just about a minute and plus left at the end of the game. But Bears lose this one. A lot of good, a lot of bad. Marvelous. Where are you after this game? Are you optimistic, pessimistic? Are you more down the middle than ever? Where were you after watching this Bears game against the Minnesota Vikings?
Obviously, there's been plenty of conversation about the passing game, and now it was the passing game that exceeded expectations, and the running game did not. Montgomery was back, and like you say, he only got, he didn't do very much. He had 20 yards and 12 carries, and then Herbert 4 carries, 11 yards. I mean, it's really too bad. They needed a varied attack, but it was good to see Mooney's 2 catches for 52 yards and whatnot. And we've been talking about this: win, lose, win, lose, win, lose. Maybe they go 3-3 with the Commanders coming up, but it's anybody that thought this was going to be a playoff team, it's not going to happen. It looks like, and the Fields experiment continues. When it's like every week there's more and more. It's like Chicago's that way. There's like 5 articles about the Bears, and every Monday everybody has an opinion. Opinions are like what. So, but in terms of my opinion, what did I say? 7-9, 6-10. So they're on target. So it's not a team that makes you jump out of your seat this year. I mean, I'd like to see a little bit more innovation still, like I said before. But, it is what it is. And the Vikings won the game. And, again, the Packers lost, which is always good to see, too.
It just goes to show how random the NFL is. You're looking around all the scores today. When you're listening to this on the Sports Cubicle, you'll have an idea of how Sunday Night Football is going. And it's just showing how the league is so down the middle. There's so much parity. And just to give you guys an idea, the Bears were down in this game, 21-3. I mean, it was a crazy thing. And Kirk Cousins going 32 for 41, 296 yards, a touchdown, an interception, but willing to give you the game. Dalvin Cook, 18 for 94 and 2 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson, 12 for 154. This is something we mentioned, and I think anybody who watches Bears football saw coming, is this defense is just so vulnerable. It's so young when it comes to its secondary. It has injuries, no Jalen Johnson. And then you're looking at this run defense that has not been able to stop anybody. And in the NFL, there are a lot of good running backs, but the Bears have played some of the top tier guys in this industry, and they've been burned when it comes to either great receivers or great running backs. So say what you will about the offense. This defense hasn't carried its part of the load. It hasn't carried its end of the bargain. Now, there has been times where I think here in Chicago, we're more willing to give a lot of leeway to the defense because there's been so many years where the defense carried this franchise. But this Bears team needed a defense, and they did make adjustments in the second half, but it's needed them to make a big-time interception, to take something to the house, and it hasn't done that. It is falling strictly on Justin Fields. How many times over the last few years, Marvelous, when you and I have come here and it's down to Justin again. It's down to Justin again, and he just doesn't have enough talent around him. This play right here, Pettis drops 2 balls that were right in his hands. And look, I don't know if that makes a difference of a game. Pettis obviously isn't Justin Jefferson, but in the NFL, when you have that play, you have to make it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and the thing is, too, I thought I would have bet against Cook not getting 100 yards. He ended up, 96 or something, 94. But, I mean, Cousins put it up 41 times, 32 completions, 296 yards. Now it's a secondary we're going to be crying about.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think that is? Do you think is it strictly just roster manipulation, roster construction that Ryan Pace and Matt Eberflus, the Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy era compared to what the Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus era is, that they just had no choice but to blow this up, and that they're just hoping that they can survive, that Justin can survive. He develops a little bit, which I think we did see some development in the second half of this game, but also trying to just figure out what random talent they could keep on. That this isn't going to be the Bears team. Think about all the turnover from last year to this year. There's going to be just as much turnover next year. Do you think this is strictly roster construction? Is this coaching? Is this the quarterback? If you could try after 5 weeks to pinpoint where we can just narrow it down, what is it? Is it just the construction of this roster?
Well, if we weren't a major market, we'd be the Jacksonville Jaguars, maybe. And there aren't like 5 different reporters reporting on it, so it doesn't magnify it as much. But in all, I mean, it tells you something. Where the most tackles were made by Jones, Gordon, and Jackson.
There you tackles,
go. And 7 for Morrow. So right there, that's bad news. And then, how many sacks did they get? 1.
Yeah, they were not sending a lot of pressure. They weren't making Kirk have happy feet, and it seemed like they definitely made adjustments in the second half. But and even for the Bears, only 2 sacks allowed, 1 sack allowed for Minnesota. But there were, I think, more than anything, it was also the penalties, right, that you saw just biting the Bears in the butt, including that play when Justin Fields essentially scores a touchdown, changes the momentum of it. Correct?
Right, absolutely. Penalties are definitely killers. I mean, it's always at the worst time, of course. So that's what happens.
Are you more optimistic about this coaching staff after a few weeks? I feel like we could start grading these guys more critically, whether it's the players or whether it's the GM or the coach. And one thing that just aggravated me, and we haven't talked about it here on the Sports Cubicle as we break down the Chicago Bears loss to the Minnesota Vikings, 29-22, moving to 2-3 on the season. It's a Sports Cubicle with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, throughout the entire show. Mike Mercado. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. But that penalty to start the game, marvelous one. I try to be fair, and I try not to get overly emotional, especially so early in a game. But when the first play of you getting the ball, you don't have enough men on the field, and you get a delay of game. And then how many bad penalties from receivers and offensive line? I mean, Mustafa, is that coaching? Yeah. Is that the players? Where do you land on that when you see mistakes like that?
It's obviously ultimately on the players because they need to be where they're supposed to be. I mean, there are other penalties that sometimes when Fields passes and he looks like he's going to scramble, I think they have an ineligible receivers downfield, honestly. So, I mean, there are mistakes that aren't even called. I mean, they only had, 6 penalties. So, I mean, it wasn't their worst day. They had 6 penalties for 41 yards. So, I mean, it was just the timing of them, actually, that was the issue. So, I think that I'm still willing to give the new regime a chance because, it's, what are we in 5 games in? So, I mean, it's too soon to really make an overall judgment, but I do think that they're better at making adjustments. There's been games where they did successfully create some life where there wasn't any, San Francisco, for example, and that. So, and Houston. So, I mean, there are games where they do come to life, but against an average or better than average opponent, they haven't shown a lot of spark. I mean, I guess San Francisco is a better than average opponent who they beat, but it's really hard to say. They come up and they'll beat somebody. Maybe they'll beat New England or somebody. Who knows? I mean, you never know.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting thing with who knows who they're going to beat. I think that's what's important. We're going to be critical on the coaching staff. I do think it's important to also bring up they don't quit on that Eberflus. This is a team that is full of professionals, whether they will be on rosters next year, whether they're good professionals when it comes to other talents. They're a team of professional athletes. They go out there and they play the best of their ability. Whether that means they are good enough to execute the plan, that's a different conversation. I can live with somebody not be talented enough if they're trying, if they're not doing dumb things. And this is the type of game where I learned the fortitude of this regime this coaching staff, this quarterback, and some of these players. This is a game they had no business being in. We were talking last week that what was going to happen. Justin Jefferson was going to go off. Dalvin Cook was going to go off. That crowd is going to be crazy. It's a team coming back from London that's feeling good about themselves. And everything was kind of playing out that way. But this team found a way to make the adjustments, which is something they didn't do underneath Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. And they played a game all the way to the end. And even the last play, where you have a young wide receiver who's just trying to do something a little too extra against his former team. It sucks. This isn't a guy who's going to be on your team next year. This is not a guy who's going to affect the future of the Bears. It affects the moments in time that we're living in where it's upsetting. But even then, it was a guy trying to make an extra play, trying to get an extra yard. And I think that in itself is kind of a telltale of this team that whether or not they're going to win games is different than they're going to play hard. They may lose by 15 points. They might be able to cover the spread. Right. They're going to be in that game. They're going to make you feel like they're in that game.
Yeah, well, I didn't get to hear the post-game remarks like I usually do, and by the coach or the quarterback and that kind of thing. So I just wonder what they had to say, because sometimes that's indicative of what they're thinking, to really hear them speak. So I'd be interested to hear that. I'm going to listen to that later.
Well, let me ask you this, as a coach, as a scout, as somebody who's covered so much of Chicago sports, and what do you think would be the messaging from the coaching staff after this game? If you're Matt Eberflus, if you're Luke Getsy, what are you telling Justin, Khalil, Montgomery, a Darnell Mooney, a Cole Kmet? What are you telling them in this effort? Are you telling them this was as good of a game as we can if we just don't make so many mistakes like we didn't? What do you say as a coach, as a scout, to some of these guys after this type of game?
Well, publicly, what you say, and he's done this in the past, is we're making progress. And sometimes he actually gives specifics, doing better tackling, or our passing game showed a lot of life. So those are some of the things I would expect him to say. And now we just got to combine it and put it all together and finish. Those are the kinds of things. And he actually does handle press conferences way better than his predecessor. I will say that. He gives a better vibe and a better presentation, I think.
I think what's interesting is when you see what's happening with Brian Daboll in New York and what's happening here in Chicago with Matt Eberflus, there's obviously going to be comparisons, because both guys are interviewing for these jobs, and we're seeing right now how New York is out there beating the Packers and the Bears, and they're doing it with a hobbled Daniel Jones. But I think 5 weeks in, you've talked about how he holds himself to a standard. He speaks well, and he's out there not being so coy with the media. Do you think that Chicago 5 weeks in buys in more with Matt Eberflus or less after the few games that you see? Do you think even in a loss, this was the best type of loss they could have had?
I think that with Nagy, that he lost some of the players, in last year. I think that Eberflus the players have his back more, and I think that they, for example, even when Fields is asked about the plays, he says, I execute the plays, and he doesn't say that somebody made a bad decision. He says, these are the plays and I execute them. He could say they were crappy plays or whatever, but so I think that they have a better cohesion and a better feeling as no I in team kind of thing.
I want to hit on this before we kind of take a quick look into next week. But what did you think about going for it on the 2-point conversion? And what did you think about the onside kick? I'll tell you this much about the play calling. We did talk a lot of smack about the play calling the last few weeks. Whether you liked them or didn't, I do enjoy the fact that they were aggressive, that they did put Justin out there, and whether it's credit to Justin or the coaching staff or a little bit of both, it felt like they were more aggressive, and more importantly, Justin felt like he was comfortable, that he was decisive. Whether the play was made, they threw it up the field like Josh Allen did for 97 yards, like it just looked like he was in control. Did you notice that the play calling was more aggressive and Justin felt more decisive under pocket?
I did, and it seemed like he had a little bit better protection than I was used to, which is maybe counterintuitive because they didn't have one of their regulars.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, it's hard to say if that's, going to go forward like that, but he does need to, he needs time,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And I guess that takes us to 2023.
And again, it's just another year of development. You just need to see certain steps. And I think a step that we saw in this one was the way he's in the pocket. This time around, he moved a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. He moved the pocket with him. It wasn't just a strict, I'm going to roll out. Oh, I feel pressure. I'm just going to make. No, everything's felt like there was a reason behind it. Like, oh, I know what they want from me. I know the play call that they're trying to make me do. I know where my guy should be. He just needs to come down with the ball. And I think for a lot of people, that's huge.
Yeah, I don't know if this works in the pros like it does in college, but you see athletic running quarterbacks, they'll put a fullback right behind the line, and the athletic quarterback will run in that direction, and the fullback and the line will blow open a hole. Mm-hmm. So I mean that seems pretty basic to me, and I don't care if it's obvious that he's running that way, but if you can knock some people down, who cares?
Yeah.
So I wanted more field running plays. I mean, I don't want him to get broken down or anything, but I think he has a skill set, and I'm remembering at Ohio State where this was true, that they'd have planned running plays, and they had the blocking. And that's the key. If you get a hole and he can get through it, then he's going to gain big yards. So, and you got to have that threat, I think, more so than what they've demonstrated.
I agree. And I think at the end of this game, it's still a loss. It's a game that you could have won. It's a game you had no business being in at the end of it. It just, you feel that way because you put yourself back into that game. I will say, use this as a building block. This is the NFL. You're always so close. You're in these games. And speaking of that, next week, quick turnaround, Thursday Night Football over at Bezos Land in Amazon Prime. It is the Bears and the Commanders. The Bears are going to win this game because both teams kind of stink in different ways, and they're both going in different directions. I think the Bears win this game. I'm fascinated to watch Thursday Night Football invested this type of way now. I've enjoyed the Thursday Night Football broadcast, even though we had that horrible play with Tua, and there's been some ups and downs with the new stream. But I love Herb Street. I like Al Michaels. I think, Al Michaels, obviously one of the GOATs. Herb Street was really good for college football. I think he does his job, and he does his research and his homework for the NFL. But it's a game. The Bears should win. There's not a lot of scariness. You could talk about Gibson and Robinson and McLaren, but really it's still Carson Wentz and the Washington Commanders. Shout out to Chico. But the Bears should win this game.
Right. If those of you that don't know, you don't have to worry about streaming this one. It's going to be on good old WFLD.
There you go.
Thursday night. So everybody will be able to watch that. So you'll get to hear Do You Believe in Miracles? Doing one of the greats, like you say, the GOAT. And it still is hard to see him there and Buck on ESPN. I'm still getting used to that. It's a little, but that's what's happened. They're moving for their 20s of millions of dollars. And
yeah. Just wait till Brady gets his. Wait until Brady gets his money. That's going to be something. Who do you think wins this game on Thursday? Who do you got? I know we're just coming off of this one, and you haven't heard the coaches yet. No injury report, but a quick turnaround, a lot of rest days. Who do you got on Thursday night?
And I had the Bears winning this game in my projections for the season, so I'll stick with that. So I think that's what's going to happen, and I think that they will combine that passing game, and I think Washington will allow them to have a little bit of passing, a little bit of running based upon the history for Washington this year. So that will be good to see that. So I hope it'll be a good night for the Bears on Thursday night.
It'd be great for them to get a win on Thursday after this type of game on a Sunday and have 10 days off until the next game. Unless I don't believe they're on the Monday night the following week, but the idea that you get a long-term break, you get to go to film and have 2 games that look good if you win against Washington. I think that's really important. And I think it's really important that we're able to see development each and every week. We know we all want wins because it's the NFL, but if we get this that you can hold on to, be like, oh, okay, this is good, this is good, and this is good. Because just 2 weeks ago, Trevor Lawrence was the truth. And now Jacksonville's having a hard time, right? So we know these are baby steps. But Marvelous One, thank you so much for joining us on this post game. The Marvelous West Coast Hollywood Marvelous, him and the missus finally taking a well-deserved, well-needed vacation.
Amen. And listen, If the Bears had won this game, it would have been a 3-way tie for first. Can you believe it?
No, see, we didn't need to know that. You talk about trick-or-treating this time of month. That was almost a treat for all of us. But thank you, each and everyone. We hope you guys enjoyed this post-game show. Marvelous One is going to go sunbathing and watching some football the rest of his Sunday.
Go Chargers.
Go Chargers. We hope
Go Padres.
Yes, we hope you each have a wonderful rest of your weekend. We have a jam-packed show today. Tony La Russa out. The White Sox now looking for a new manager. Paulie and Devin will break that all down. We will be back here next week as we recap the Thursday night game between the Washington Commanders and your Chicago Bears, hopefully after a victory. We want to know all your thoughts about this game, this comeback, but them falling just a little bit short to the Minnesota Vikings, 29-22, moving to 2-3. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. It's the Marvelous One, Hollywood, Dan Marver. It is Paulie Dangerous, Paul Chivari. It is Devin Tingle. I'm Mike Mercado. Please take care of yourself, take care of each other. We will see you next time.